Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is James Quintero. I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Good morning, and thank you very much for taking up this measure today. I'll be testifying in support of SB 1024. Increasingly, local governmental entities are utilizing non-voter approved debt instruments like COs and TANs to go around failed elections and obtain the object of their desire. And this anti-democratic tendency violates the public trust, and it commits public resources to controversial purposes. And I just want to offer up a few examples to punctuate the point. In 2019, the Travis County Commissioners Court decided to borrow $328 million to build a new county courthouse, just 3 years after voters rejected a similar proposal. Mr. Chairman, you highlighted the city of Amarillo, who utilized TANs to go around that particular failed election. That was a $260 million issuance there. By the way, in that example, voters overwhelmingly rejected the proposal put forward by City Council on a vote of 61% against, 39% for. That example is actually talked about a little bit more in your handout by Rice University professor John Diamond, who I thought wrote an excellent article in the Houston Chronicle. And then late last year, Ector County officials decided to issue $325 million in new CO debt to build a courthouse and a juvenile detention facility several years after voters rejected, again, a similar proposal. I think these examples illustrate the weakness of current law and the need for statutory changes to prevent local governments from circumventing the will of voters. Representative Bumgarner, you raised a concern, I think a legitimate one, about the length of time here. One thing I might offer in response is that the taxing unit has the ability to go back to voters immediately after a failed election under current law. And I know there are some changes being considered by this body to maybe remedy that, but under current law, if you as a city or a county go and ask voters for something and they say no, you have an opportunity to rejigger your proposal and then come back at them in the very next cycle. So you don't even need to utilize COs. And then Representative Schoolcraft, I believe you raised a concern related to school districts. I would just note that by and large, when you consider the use of certificates of obligation, those are generally city and county specific. I'm not really aware of any school districts that utilize CO. So those are just two things that I'd offer up in response, and I want to thank you for your time.
Members, other questions? Representative Bumgarner.
So, yeah, thanks for being here. And
Yes, sir.
let's just say, for example, that under what we were talking about, bond proposal fails, then 2 years later it passes, and for whatever reason there's a big change order and there was no money in the project for that, but they would have to issue a CO to cover up that pitfall. Under this current legislation, they wouldn't be allowed to do it because it failed 2 years prior, even though it passed 2 years forward.
So in the instance where it was approved in the following 2 years, I presume that the city or the county would come forward with whatever right-sized bond package that they think the community would support, and then it would be approved as a general obligation bond.
Agreed, but I'm just saying things happen, and let's say they were in the middle of building the whatever it was, and let's say there was a freak hurricane and they didn't have hurricane coverage for whatever reason, and they had to make up that loss. Then that CO would cover that in the instance where they had to do something on the fly, where they couldn't. And if we do this, it's going to hinder that. So can we change that language a little bit to protect the municipality and our taxpayers?
May I interject and just say that I think what this bill is addressing is voter rejected debt. So in your case, you're
correct.
talking about something the voters did approve,
But
and now are coming back within a year or two and saying, well, we didn't, inflation or whatever else has affected our cost.
But the hypothetical is voters rejected the debt 2 years prior, and there's a 5-year moratorium, and then they approved the debt 2 years later. I'm just trying to make sure that the moratorium wouldn't be affected by that new changeover, because if they reject it 2 years past, then 2 years forward it does. There's that 5-year gap, and under the law it says, hey, you can't issue a CO for any of that debt that was rejected 2 years prior, even though it it was gone forward in that 2 years.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't,
No, Mr. Chair.
Does that make sense?
It does. I do think emergency spending would be separate and apart from what maybe this bill touches.
CO's a CO.
Yes. Again, I think the way that the general obligation bond would be formulated and put forward, though, that I'm not sure that would necessarily interact with that 5-year provision. But
Just something to think
Yes, sir.
about, because when we sit in these seats and we legislate things like this, the letter of the law is the letter of the law, and our municipalities have to follow that. And if there's any murkiness or any gray area, then it is what it is. And I don't want an unintended consequence here that's going to do more damage than good. Something needs to be more thoughtful on that process is all.
sure.
members, other questions? Representative Bryant.
Well, I'd just like to say I agree with Mr. Baumgartner. We're also overlooking the fact that the voters have an opportunity to punish legislators who do things they don't want to do. I don't know what happened in Amarillo after this example you gave took place, but the people in Travis County don't appear to be too unhappy about that courthouse that got built. So we don't know what the local politics are, and just coming up and legislating based on theory without knowing what took place on the bond issue, whether some large group of people with a lot of money misled the voters, and the voters now realize what happened and they are glad to have the project built. A lot of things can happen. So I guess the difference is how much the faith we have in voters, and I prefer to let the voters figure these things out instead of hamstringing them on the basis, hamstringing local government on the basis of theories.
Representative Schoolcraft.
Mr. Quintero, just a clarification for me. I'm new to this.
Yes, sir.
The bill starts off talking about bonds,
Yes.
and then it immediately flips over to saying anticipation notes on everything else. Are bonds only anticipation notes, or do bonds include both types?
So I believe that under Section 1, they utilize the term anticipation note to pay, let's see.
Just paragraph number 1, a bond proposition, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 says the amount of anticipation note, et cetera. 3 talks about anticipation notes.
And I think what this Section 1 gets at is the situation in Amarillo where they were utilizing tax anticipation notes to secure the purchase or to secure the financing up front. And then what they intended to do before controversy erupted is they were going to refinance those proceeds into a general obligation bond format.
Okay, does the word bond include anticipation notes?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
Only certificates of obligation?
So the certificates of obligation, I believe, would be covered under Section 2, on page 2. My understanding is Section 1 relates to the tax notes. Section 2 is the CO portion.
Wonder why they use the word bond instead of specifying what they're talking about. Okay, that's fine, we'll figure it out.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Members, other questions? Representative Hayes.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and testifying today.
Yes, sir.
The other question that was raised a while ago was the 5% number. That is, if you had a city or governmental body that had been particularly frugal and didn't have much debt, or they became fast growth, would 5% be an appropriate number in those circumstances? Or should there be exceptions for that, or 5% is a magic good number?
It's a great question, sir. So the tax notes are generally used to cover short-term cash shortfalls, right? It's to get you through a slow period in your revenue cycle. And I think what the legislature, or what this particular bill attempts to do is establish a ceiling on the level of use for that tax note. because it's not intended to be a long-term debt item where we're consuming lots of additional resources. It's just to get you through a rough patch. And so I think that 5% is well-intended and a good guardrail to make sure that our cities and our counties aren't misusing these tax notes for other purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Members, other questions?